Hi, my name is Rebecca, and if you have been frequenting the same parts of the internet that I have, you've probably seen a lot of people talking about this new Amazon show called The Wilds. And if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, should I just watch all the gay scenes? Or should I watch the actual show? Or maybe that's not your problem and you just actually are genuinely curious about what the show is about and aren't sure if you should watch it or not. You also may have heard that this show has already been renewed for a season 2, which is a huge deal since it's only been out for less than a month. Well, luckily for you, I actually watched the show, not just the gay scenes. If you're somebody who's not sure about starting new shows, or if you maybe watched the trailer and thought it looked not exactly your style, but you weren't really sure, I'm gonna try and give you a breakdown that'll go through like what the show is about, what they do well, what they don't do well, and then if you should watch it or what type of person might like this kind of show. Obviously, this type of review is gonna have some spoilers, but I will do my best to keep it to the first episode and then also just things that won't affect your interpretation of the series as a whole or really affect your watching experience in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so first of all, what is The Wilds? The Wilds is a new show on Amazon about 8 teenage girls who get stranded on a desert island after their plane crashes. They are supposed to be on their way to a feminism retreat, or at least that's what they think, but they never make it. Their plane crashes into the ocean en route, and they find themselves alone on a desert island. Now, before you think this is just some like Lord of the Flies type of thing, there is actually a catch. While the girls think they're totally alone on the island, the viewer knows there's actually a scientist watching them through hidden cameras who has manufactured this entire thing as an experiment. So while they think that there's a possibility for rescue, the viewer knows that that's not gonna happen. What makes this show especially interesting is that it's actually told by the girls in the future / present, it's them after the rescue, telling the stories about what happened on the island, but then also telling stories about what happened in their lives that led to them getting sent on this retreat in the first place. Which leads me to, what did this show do well? So one thing right off the bat they did well is it's a very interesting premise. It's original. The characters are really well written. They're very well-rounded, three-dimensional characters, and the characters aren't always likable. Of the 8 girls, they all have their moments where they are annoying and their moments when they are awesome and you love them so much, and that is way more realistic than a show where the character is likable all the time or is not likable all the time. And they also have different dynamics with different people. There are 8 of them, and so the different combinations of people creates different dynamics, which is really interesting and super well written. I also felt like they talked like teenagers, like they're supposed to be teenagers and they talk like teenagers, and that's pretty difficult to do. A lot of times it can feel like unnatural or old or awkward when they try and put slang into the dialogue, but in this case I actually felt like they sounded pretty natural, and obviously that is coming from a 2020 perspective because in 3 years will they sound natural? Maybe not. But for now I feel like it sounded pretty darn good. Something else that the show does really well is its use of time passing, making them look dirtier and dirtier, of their hair getting messier and messier, and of their skin getting worse and more sunburned as they spend more time on the island, to make it look like they'd actually been spending that much time there. Another thing that they did really well, I felt, was that it was very smart. I really like when I'm watching a show if I'm like trying to figure it out as it goes, and I feel like this show really did that. As they clued into things, I was trying to figure out who that connected to and things like that, and I wasn't always right, which is something that doesn't happen that often. Not to like be like, oh, I'm the best at guessing, but like I am pretty good at figuring out things as it goes, and with this show, even though I did figure out some of the things, there were things that I wasn't able to figure out, and that to me is a mark of something that is really well written and well designed. This show drops a lot of hints as it goes. The girls in the future / present will mention things that haven't yet happened on the island, which is a cool thing that lets the audience have some dramatic irony, which is when the audience knows something that the characters don't, which happens a lot throughout this show, as you, the viewer, get to see the perspective of the scientists and the girls, and therefore know the bigger picture of what's happening much more than the characters in the show actually do. Obviously, for the gays, I felt like the WLW relationship in the show was well done. I think that their development makes sense. I don't think it feels rushed. Because of their circumstances on the island, they've kind of already seen the worst parts of each other, and so the fact that they still like each other after that is something that feels realistic to their scenario. Another thing that is worth noting is it has a female director, female writers, producers, which is something that is really cool. And the cast is basically all girls. The acting was really good. I felt like everybody was really solid. About half the cast is Australian, I learned afterwards, and they all fake American accents pretty realistically. You can only tell sometimes. I think the only time I was a little bit confused was one of the characters sings a couple times, and I felt like it was a little less American-y sounding when she was doing that. But otherwise, if you didn't know, I don't think you would know. They think they did a good job, and that's something that's very difficult to do and not always super well done. So let's move into the next logical step here, which is what didn't they do that well? Honestly, it was a very well created show, and I think they did a lot of things really well. I'd say the number one thing that caught me off guard was that nowhere in the advertising for the show did they really talk much about what their before lives were going to look like, and those before lives contain a lot of things that could be very stressful to watch. I felt like, honestly, the before lives flashbacks were way more stressful and difficult to watch than them on the island. The flashback section touches on a lot of sensitive topics like eating disorders, pedophilia, death of a parent, familial problems, death of a friend, and strong religious driven homophobia, which for me at least was very difficult to watch. As a gay person, I felt like that was a hard thing to sit through. The double-edged sword of what I was talking about before with really good writing is that making these come across super realistically means that they could be a little too close for comfort if it's something that you have experienced yourself. And without any way of knowing that this is going to happen, the only thing that the show warns you about ahead of time is that there's a mention of teen suicide. The rest of these issues, you just go in totally blind. And while that might be something you're expecting from a show that's set in a high school or set in the real world, coming into the show and expecting it to just be a show about girls stranded on an island, it was definitely not something that you could anticipate coming in. So I think that is something that you should take into account when you're going to watch the show. It's definitely an intense show, although there are moments that are genuinely funny. I'll put a clip in of a moment that I felt was actually very funny. Here it is.
You ready to bring your A game? I mean, I'm ready to bring an A game. I have no idea what kind.
But even though there are tokens of humor and times when there are lighthearted and good things happening to them, the overarching theme of the show is much darker and has much more serious undertones than I think you might have expected going into it. Something the show highlights I think is very interesting is the problems with society. That is definitely a running theme throughout it. It raises some interesting points about how much choice people get in the actions that they have, and also how much familial and societal pressure crushes the spirit of a kid, especially teenage girls. That is something that the show highlights a lot. If you're not into shows that go into the like dark and dirty parts of being a teenager, this probably isn't the type of show you're going to enjoy, even if you like Stranded Island shows. The story is very plot driven, which is something that I like, but not necessarily everybody does. I think that they work really hard on trying to make sure that they got all the information that they needed to get into there, sometimes at the expense of letting the characters breathe a little. The show does leave some plot holes open separate from cliffhangers. I think there are some things that are just not addressed again that are mentioned earlier, but because it's season 1 and there is going to be a season 2, can't really fault them for that. Other things just like plot hole wise, the show explains away how they have different sets of clothes by them continuously finding more of their suitcases and more of their luggage, but all the clothes fit them all perfectly and they're all completely different sizes, which obviously for a show perspective they had to keep giving them new clothes, but it doesn't really make a ton of sense. Also, the clothes continue to stay within their own styles, even though they're only supposed to be coming from 1 or 2 people's stuff. That's really nitpicky though. So, should you watch it? I think if you're someone who really likes shows that are intelligently written and are filled with lots of Easter eggs and references to itself, this is gonna be a show that you will absolutely love. I would say don't watch this show if you are not a fan of teen dramas. If you have gone through experiences like any of the ones that I mentioned where this might be hard to watch or traumatic for you, I would say this would not be the show for you. This is a heavy show and it goes through a lot more things than you would expect from it. And if that's not your cup of tea, this is your warning, don't watch it. But if you're a fan of realistic depictions of teenagers, the found family trope, group dynamics, character development, and psychological analysis of characters, this is definitely a show that you would really like. I would not necessarily recommend this show as a show to watch with the family. I think there are, especially in the flashbacks, references to traumatic family environments or toxic family environments that might not be the most comfortable to watch with a parent. But you know your family better than I do, so maybe not. Overall, it's only 10 episodes. It's very easy to watch back to back, so it's definitely worth giving it a shot if you think it's something that you can handle. Something I will say, if you're someone like me who sometimes only watches the gay scenes, if you don't think the plot is up your alley, you could very easily just watch the gay scenes without seeing any of the traumatic stuff. Although I would recommend watching the whole show and not just the gay scenes if you think it's something that you can get through. The show also has an interesting obsession with the artist Pink. I don't really understand why, but she's mentioned a ton of times. I'm not sure if it's because she like breaks gender norms or something, but if you're a fan of Pink, maybe you'll be even more of a fan of the show. I don't really know, but it is interesting. Overall, I'd say I liked it, and I will be watching season 2. This video is not in any way sponsored by The Wilds or by Amazon. I just genuinely thought it was something that was worth talking about. Thank you for watching. If this helped you make a decision about watching The Wilds, let me know. I hope it was helpful. If you did watch it, what'd you think? Did you like it? Did you agree with my analysis? If you want to follow me on anything, I'm @Cabernet on everything. That's my name backwards. It's in the description. I can do more of these if that's something you might be interested in. I watch a lot of stuff. Let me know. Bye.